Back to the war room we go. It is time to redraft. Mel Kiper and Field Yates tell us which players should have gone where from the 2024 NFL draft class. Plus, we respond, as always, to your questions, your takes, and your draft dreams live as First Draft starts right now. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to First Draft. You're with us every week this college football season on Thursday afternoons. We are live, as always, on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. There they are, the experts themselves, Mel Kiper and Field Yates. A reminder, Mel's big board is out now on ESPN.com and updated every Friday. So, this is my first season with you guys. And Field, I've learned a few things along the way. First, Mel hates trivia. I suggested trivia. Mel hates trivia. 2, Mel hates tanking. I suggested tanking. Mel hates tanking. So I'm a little bit nervous about asking this question. But Mel, as the man who invented the mock draft, as the man upon whom this entire industry has been built, how do you feel about redrafts?
I don't want to be labeled a draft analyst with intangible issues, with a bad attitude that is going to get dropped down the board because he's not a team player. So I'll kind of voice my opinion on things that I'm a little rigid in, I'm not changing. But with this, I'm all in because young Fielding kind of wore me out on this. And Greeny, I don't want to be 3 strikes and I'm out because I've attacked you guys on 2 subjects. I don't want to attack you on a 3rd. So I actually got excited about this the other day when I was sitting there playing it with it, having a little fun, checking out previous trades that were made. I'm going to be a trader at some point. I might be a trader today. Who knows? So it's going to be a lot of fun. We don't know what the other one did. I don't know what Field is going to do here. He doesn't know what I'm going to do. Greeny, you don't know what either one of us are probably going to do. So it's going to be interesting to see what direction we go with this redraft of the 2024 selection process.
Well, Field, it was your idea. Yeah. So why don't you explain for everyone joining us? We posted it on Twitter. Yep. So some folks have an idea. Mr. Boutte, my new favorite Twitter X handle that we have heard from so far this season, tweeted, when we tweeted what the idea is, he said, this is the First Draft podcast, not the Last Draft podcast. Well, today it actually is the Last Draft podcast. Field, it was your idea. Explain what we're going to do.
Hey, Mr. Boutte, deal with it. Because today what we are doing is we are redrafting the first 10 picks of the 2024 NFL draft. And Greeny, I thought of it this way. I cover the NFL, so I'm a fan of other sports. Recently, I was reading Jeff Passan, the great Jeff Passan, who covers the MLB at an extraordinary level for us at ESPN, his off-season preview. And he has some predictions in there. And you know what? If those predictions aren't right, I still find them fun. Knowing Jeff, several of them probably will be correct. But what I realize is people like hypotheticals. I do when I am consuming content of other sports. And so while we are only a halfway into this rookie season for the 2024 draft class, we are also already a halfway through their first season. So I felt like, you know what better time than right now to take stock of the 2024 NFL draft class. We could do this next week. It could look entirely different. We could do it a year from now. It could look entirely different. And you know what? If I have it my way, I'll convince Kiper to do it a couple times a year now. That's my new goal for the Last Draft.
Don't push
podcast.
It now, Field.
That's right.
Don't push it.
Redraft as much as we possibly can. Watch the numbers on this one. The numbers are going to be off the chart here. I can promise you that.
Now let's set some ground rules here. Okay. So before I start asking you guys, and I will now announce these were the first 10 picks of last year's draft. We're going to do the top 10. So last year, in case all of it isn't fresh in everyone's memory, Caleb Williams went number 1 to Chicago. Jayden Daniels went number 2 to Washington. Drake Maye went number 3 to the Patriots. Marvin Harrison Jr. went 4 to Arizona. Joe Alt went 5 to the Chargers. 6, the Giants took Malik Nabers. 7, the Titans took J.C. Latham. 8, the Falcons stunned the world and took the quarterback Michael Penix Jr. 9, the Bears took Rome Odunze. And at 10, the Vikings took J.J. McCarthy, who unfortunately got hurt and hasn't played at all this rookie year. Now, as we redraft, Mel, I want to know how much you're taking into account the circumstances the players have found themselves in, because some might look at it and say, well, obviously, Jayden Daniels has been so much better than Caleb Williams. It's not debatable that he would go first. But is that a Jayden versus Caleb issue, or is it the situation Jayden is in versus the situation Caleb is in issue? So how are you approaching this before we begin?
I'm approaching it as if I were looking at it right now, who would be the better fit for that team, the better player for that team? And it's kind of revisionist history, but it's really not, because when you go into the draft, even last year, we were saying, okay, Jayden went from a 4th, 5th rounder to the 2nd pick overall. It's tough to move him ahead of a guy that we all said was a generational type quarterback, or thought he could be. And then he kind of fell back. Caleb did that final year and wasn't necessarily generational because he had some inconsistencies that final campaign. But the Jayden, all of a sudden you have to say, am I going to push Jayden ahead of him? Thought about it, didn't do it. Some may have, but it got to that point where you were taking a 4th, 5th rounder and moving him way up like we did with Burrow. And sometimes it's tough to push that guy in our own minds to reconcile that, or we're going to put him over the guy that came in as the guy that nobody was going to touch. And that was Caleb Williams. So I think we have to weigh all the different factors, Greeny, but I think it gets down to, if we were looking at it right now, based on what we've seen, and not a knee-jerk reaction to a situation or a game, but where we are right now in real time, what will we do? And that's the way I'm approaching this whole process.
Okay, so Field, I'll let you go first.
Yeah.
If you're the Chicago Bears and you have the first pick in the 2024 draft, knowing what we know now, who do you take?
Yeah, it's Jayden Daniels, and I'm not going to sit here and crush the Caleb Williams selection. I was a strong proponent of Caleb Williams being the #1 overall pick in this past year's draft class. We had Jayden Daniels, the 2nd highest rated player on both my board and Mel's. It's not like we felt like there was a significant gap between the two, but Caleb Williams, I thought, was the worthy selection at the time. I think Jayden Daniels has proved enough in his first 10 weeks of being an NFL quarterback, 11th coming in about 8 hours tonight when they play the Philadelphia Eagles on Amazon Prime, that he deserved to have been the #1 overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. And here are the traits that we all were hoping we would see at the NFL level from Jayden Daniels that we have, and they have been masterful. 1, gifted vertical thrower down the field. Terry McLaurin's season and his career has taken off in a way that he had never had happen before because he's been through this carousel of quarterbacks. Great vertical passing down the field. Great rushing ability as well. We have seen less from Jayden Daniels of late as a rusher because of that rib injury that he suffered against the Carolina Panthers, which cost him 3/4 of that game, but no full games beyond that. But at least looks to me like the Commanders have been more protective of him. And then finally, and this is something that's kind of non-quantifiable, if you will, cool as a cucumber demeanor. That's all the LSU said about him. This guy was completely unfazed by anything. And now it has gone largely well for the Washington Commanders this year. But in a few moments of adversity, we have seen Jayden Daniels keep his calm, keep his poise. In that first game after that rib injury, of course, that masterful Hail Mary play in which he throws the 65 air yard pass that ends up being caught by Noah Brown for a win over Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. Enough of a sample size now for me to feel like Jayden would have been worthy of that #1 overall pick.
You too, Mel?
Yeah, I agree. Organizationally, what Washington has now with Adam Peters, GM, obviously you think about Quinn, head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, what does success do? Success of a quarterback, success of an offense leads to maybe your coordinator getting taken away from you after that 1 year. So maybe Cliff Kingsbury moves on and becomes a head coach again. We'll see. He's done a heck of a job with Jayden Daniels. But Jayden Daniels was ready for this. And he was ready because he went back to LSU for that final year. And you see the difference in Jayden Daniels with the head up, seeing the field. The improvement from junior to senior year at LSU was remarkable, as it was with Joe Burrow. That's why I'm pushing these guys that are like a Jalen Milroe, like a Nussmeier, like others, go back. Play as much college football as you can. That really helped Jayden Daniels for what we're seeing right now. Now, see the energy and the enthusiasm of this football team. That's contagious. Jayden always had that. But when you're successful and you're winning, it's like a bright, sunny day. It's not cloudy. Okay. There's clouds over the Bears right now. Okay. It's sunshine, beautiful blue sky in Washington because of Jayden, the GM, the head coach, and the structure now, that organizational structure that will lead to continuity, hopefully. Maybe not with Cliff Kingsbury. We'll see how that goes. But somebody gets him and moves him over as a head coach and gets him out of Washington. But I think that has all helped him and everybody buying in him. They see greatness. They see this kid come in and they were excited because they knew Jayden had what it took. And Jayden, I think, certainly with the coordinator, with the players around him, with everything now in place, everything's positive. And when everything's positive, you might have a hiccup, but it's not anything bad. It's not any big negative. It's nothing to overreact to. So for Jayden, I'm thrilled for him. Right now, no question, he would go number one in any draft. No question. He's the guy. He's done it all. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league already, which is pretty amazing. Can he maintain that? We'll see. But right now, like I say, everything right now is more than positive. It's off the charts.
Sure, of course. But that brings us into a complicated area. So there's a great tweet that we have here from Michael Adesso, who says, assuming Jayden goes 1 to Chicago and Caleb goes 2 to Washington, which is the scenario that we're going to have play out here, how would things have played out? Would Caleb right now be the runaway rookie of the year? That's really the question I was getting at. Mel, you just described what we thought. It's the opposite of what we thought, right? We thought Caleb Williams was walking into the best situation any number 1 overall pick had ever walked into because of the weapons and everything else. Instead, it is Washington, for a change, that looks like it has organizational stability, and Kingsbury has coached him like crazy. So what is the answer to Michael's question? Mel, I'll start with you. If Caleb Williams had been drafted where Jayden Daniels is now, would he look a lot more like that?
Could. That's the great unknown. You just don't know. Everything has to come together. It's like a puzzle, and some fit, some don't. You don't know how Caleb would have fit there. You don't know how. We don't know that. Okay, you're going to think it could. You think, oh, yeah, he would have been just doing exactly what Jayden did, but you don't know. You just don't. Now, Caleb's from this area. I watched Caleb play high school football. Yeah, it would have been like homecoming for him. Who knows what that pressure, and then everybody, you're in your area. Sometimes it's better to not be there sometimes. Jayden played at Arizona State, then he played at LSU. Now he's at Washington. I go back to 2 years ago. Everybody said when Bryce Young was going to Carolina, that's where the best infrastructure is. It's not with C.J. Stroud in Houston. It's with Bryce Young. How'd that turn out? C.J. Stroud had Bobby Slowick and had everything going there. And look what he's done. Look what happened with Bryce. Now it's supposed to be Caleb, like say with Chicago, with all the weapons, drafting a receiver. But guess what, guys? Guess what? And I've said this for 40, 50 years since I've been talking about this stuff. You can't beat them if you can't block them. And blocking them up front is a problem for the Chicago Bears. Now, yes, Caleb, like all young quarterbacks, holds the ball too long and tries to do a little too much. Check downs and all that. Accuracy, some throws that say, what the heck, where was that? Where were you throwing that one? But that's the way it is with a lot of young quarterbacks, okay? Yeah. I heard Brian Callahan say, hey, Will Levis had a really efficient game this past week, okay? But he had 7 sacks, and times he held the ball a little too long. And that's the balancing act between forcing it down the field or just taking a sack. Somebody, how many times? Just take the sack, right? Nothing wrong with a punt, okay? But then you say, well, if you do the check down, then you can run for some yards after catch, and maybe get us to a 4th and 2, which maybe we can go for. So everybody's got the perfect answer when you're looking from the eye in the sky. But when you're on that field and you're a young quarterback with minimal NFL starts, and you're not going against AOGs anymore, it's tough to process all that quickly. And then balancing act between, I don't want to turn. What do y'all say now? Which drives me crazy. Don't turn it over. Don't turn it over. Protect the football. That's got to get in the head of these young quarterbacks and say, I can't turn the ball over. I can't walk to the sidelines. I'll tell me to go right to the locker room if I do. It's that mind-boggling of you're putting so much on these guys that don't turn it over at all costs. Then when they don't take the shots, it's like, then they become the check down king. We can't have that. Then they take a sack. Can't have that. So it's really playing quarterback. People say it's easier than it's ever been. In some ways it is, but in a lot of ways it's harder. Why? Because they're not 3, 4, 5 years in this league like they used to be. They're right out of college, and some earlier than they should have been coming out of college, but they didn't stay their entire time. So yes, it's easier in some cases, in some ways, but in a lot of ways it's harder to play quarterback in the NFL.
So, Field, let me flip you the other side of that same equation. There's a great tweet here from Anthony Russo, who says, I'm not saying you don't take Jayden at number 1, but there's no way he has the same success with Waldron as he's had with Kingsbury, right? So is that
Waldron
right?
might still be coaching right now. Who knows?
Well, he might
say that. He might be. A great quarterback can make anybody look good.
He might be.
These guys don't. These guys didn't just figure out football. They got these jobs because they know the game. Okay, they all know this game. So, Field, you go right ahead. But I think that's to say that that he wouldn't have been successful there. How can you say that?
Well, that way we don't. These are all hypotheticals, of course. But let's start here. When we start talking about the quarterback infrastructure and surroundings for a rookie, we need to focus a little bit less exclusively on the pass catchers and a little bit more on 2 perhaps more prominent factors. 1, the offensive line, and 2, person who is coordinating the offense. If you look at some of the recent turnarounds amongst quarterbacks, a couple of them include, I would say most notably, Jared Goff. And yes, Amon-Ra St. Brown was a first-team All-Pro wide receiver last year. But when you look at this team right now, it is perhaps the most dominant offensive line in the entire NFL. On top of that, it is also the best play caller in the NFL right now, or at least on the very, very short list, right? That's what we have in Ben Johnson. So give me the play caller and the offensive line before you tell me about the wide receivers. And one more rule that I want to establish, because I heard Mel reference this, and I think you agree with this, Mel. We are retiring the term generational. No more of it, because two guys have been generational prospects in the past 3 drafts, and both of them are not playing anywhere close to it. Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams. No more generational talk from me. I don't care if it's a quarterback, a wide receiver, or a punter. I'm retired from saying generational.
I'm with you on that. I have no problem with that, Field, because we hear franchise quarterback too. He's going to be a franchise quarterback. I did radio this morning. Shedeur Sanders. We need a franchise quarterback with the Giants. It's going to be. We don't know. Okay, we don't know what these guys are going to be. I was sitting here last year saying, should they move Fields? Should they draft Caleb? I mean, Justin Fields right now is in Pittsburgh. He went 4-2, and the 2 losses were because of the defense, not because of him. And now Russell's doing a great job so far in Pittsburgh, and they're rolling. They got the Ravens this week. Bottom line is, when you talk about coordinators, and you mentioned the Detroit Lions, it's not, hey, Ben Johnson's done a great job, but you talked about it. The players on that football team. Aiden Hutchinson's out, unfortunately, with the injury. He's defense. On offense, this line, the backs, the receivers, the tight end, everything's in place for this team. So it's not, you call a play, they execute it. Does it work? Because the players do their job. And they play at that level. And in Detroit, they are. And some other organizations, they aren't. And then if he's there, so some of the injuries are, what happens? We have to go back. If all this would have played out in Chicago like it did, it would have been difficult for a quarterback. What would Jayden have done? Do you lose your confidence? When you're in a situation where you're losing, then confidence, scrutiny, criticism, all those things that you have to deal with when that happens, when it's a cloudy day, right? The clouds roll in. It's a little bit different. You get the raincoat. What happens when it's sunny all the time? Hey, a little mistake, no big deal. So the attitude, the approach of success and winning is a lot different than what happens when you stumble. Caleb's team had 3 games where he looked like he was generational. Okay, he did. He looked.
No, I don't think so.
Where he looked like he was going to be phenomenal, and then he fell back.
Yes, but generational, no. That's where I'm stopping short. Generational talk. Generational looks like what Patrick Mahomes did during his first season as a starter. Caleb looked excellent, but generational, I'm not going to go that far. I just think that we have. And Mel and I were talking about this before the show, and not to sidetrack us, we're going to get to pick number 2 in just a minute here. The sooner we accept that these players, even at the very top of the food chain, are more of a byproduct of their surroundings and the person that they are, not just the player that you see on the field, but the intangibles. And I'm talking about this mostly through the prism of quarterbacks. The sooner that we accept that, the better off we will be with living with the results. Trevor Lawrence, generational. Well, apparently not in Jacksonville. Caleb Williams, can't miss. Well, for half a season, apparently not in Chicago. And part of it is because while a quarterback influences the roster and the outcome more than any other position on the entire roster, even the very best, go check Patrick Mahomes' numbers right now this season. Is he the best quarterback in the league? Yes. Does he have a chance to go down as the best quarterback to ever play the game? Yes. His numbers right now look like, I'm just talking about the numbers here, look like a league average quarterback. That team is winning, yes, in part because of the offense, but I would argue in larger part because they are playing incredible defense and the best situational football of any team in the NFL. It's a team sport still.
Yeah. I'll just leave it at this, and I'll just put a period at the end of the sentence, and we'll move on. I would be careful, though, Field, negating the word generational completely, because what you're saying is based on what we've seen so far, he's not. When I was back with John Elway, and I brought it up with Greeny a lot, John Elway didn't look generational as a rookie. Dan Marino did. So we got to be careful here to say, because one guy's not looking as good as we thought, he's a bust. He's not what we should have had this other guy. So while we're doing this exercise, if you'd have done it in 83, you'd have had Marino ahead of Elway. How'd that turn out? Marino was great, but John Elway was better. 5 Super Bowls, 1, 2 at the end of his career. Marino went to 1 and lost early and never got back. So I think be careful not to act like we're dismissing this quarterback as a bust. As not. He still could be Patrick Mahomes didn't even play as a rookie. He played 1 game at the end of the season, and that was it. Okay, that was Alex Smith's team. That wasn't his team. And then he came in his second year. So again, the whole force feeding, rookie year, some guys need a little more time. They're all, I say, they're snowflakes. We haven't had snow in Maryland yet. You're going to get it in Connecticut before us in New York. Every snowflake's different, right? Every snowflake's different. Every quarterback situation is different.
So next week's podcast, generational or not generational? That'll be
listen, Greeny, you are a generational host of television, and don't tell me the answer is no. Don't try to be modest. Mel, you're a generational analyst, all right? We don't use that on players anymore. You two, okay. I'm okay with it. Others, no more. Retired.
Right.
With me, it's a generation gap, okay?
No.
We're almost 20 minutes in, and we've done one pick. So
we rip through 2 and 3 real quick.
So Roger Goodell is
telling the old 15-minute days, Greeny, right? The old 15 minutes with the first pick.
I'm going to move through it. So both of you, and I'm going to make sure everyone keeps track of what we're doing for those who are listening and not watching. Both of you would flop the 1 and 2 selections. So both Mel and Field have Jayden Daniels going 1 to Chicago and Caleb Williams going 2 to Washington. And I will give away that both of you also still have Drake Maye going 3 to New England. Let's get a quick take on that before we get to the wide receivers, because that's the next pressure point. Did you waver at all, Field, with as good as Bo Nix has been and as good as some of the other players around the league in general have been and as many needs as New England has? Did you waver at all about leaving Drake Maye at 3?
I wavered at all in this regard. I thought about taking him at 2. And let me just remind people, last year, I used this statement more than any other during the draft process. There was no consolation prize on these 3 quarterbacks. You've got excellent, excellent, and excellent. The Patriots had the easiest pick in the entire draft last year. Just take whoever fell to you. They should feel phenomenal about Drake Maye. Caleb Williams, I'm not going to move off of my priors enough yet to push him down from 2 to 3, but there is a lot to like about what you have seen with Drake Maye right now, who has by far the worst supporting cast around him of these 3 quarterbacks.
And that's, again, he has the supporting cast that's an issue, the O-line, the receivers, and look what he's done. He showed flashes of brilliance at times, and they were the 3rd team. Sometimes it's easier to be the team that says, okay, we'll just take who falls to us. That's easy. It's an easy call. There was talk last year, and Greeny, you know it, that the Giants move up to get Maye. Does New England move off of 3? Why in the world, if you're New England and you need a quarterback, just let somebody else go get that guy unless you flat out don't like him, then you better like somebody else and get one of these quarterbacks. So they obviously didn't like anybody better than Drake Maye. They took him. Giants would have moved up to get Maye, not J.J. McCarthy. But at this particular spot, they have their guy in Drake Maye, and they're in the AFC. They're in that division with Josh and Tua. Again, you got to have the great quarterback. They think Drake, and it looks like Drake can be great. We'll see if it pans out. We don't know yet, but he's on his way, it looks like, to being an elite quarterback in the National Football League.
Okay, so we had 3 quarterbacks go 1, 2, and 3. If we were redrafting, they would still go 1, 2, and 3, though we would have changed the order at the very top. Now we get to the next pressure point here, because just as we had debates over the best quarterback, we had debates over the best receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr. went 4 to Arizona. If you were redoing this draft right now, Field, would you still take him there?
Mel's going to get mad. I'm taking Malik Nabers here, baby. Let's go. And Greeny, I know you were actively involved in the draft process last year, obviously hosting the draft and following it closely. But on first draft, people will recall that last season we spent, I don't know how many minutes talking about, maybe even hours. Hey, Malik Nabers, Marvin Harrison Jr., flip a coin. You can land on one side or the other. What are you looking for? The guy who's better with the football in his hands after the catch, or this big physical 6'3", 205-pound wide receiver who's going to be impossible to guard in the red zone, which, by the way, he has been impossible to guard in the red zone, being Marvin Harrison Jr. It's the narrowest of margins, but Malik Nabers with the football in his hands, it's such a difference maker that he can take the load off of any quarterback, except for apparently Daniel Jones, because it sounds like that guy might be benched by the time that we're on the show next week.
Mel, did you make the switch?
No, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, to go back to the Miami game, the Rams game, other games. I mean, he's averaging 15 yards a catch with 6 touchdowns. He, to me, is Larry Fitzgerald. It's ironic the Cardinals had Larry Fitzgerald, now they have Marvin Harrison Jr. You look at him with the size, the ability to be that power forward, and to be a guy you can just throw it up to. And he's going to keep getting better and better as Kyler and him get on that same page. You see that. You've seen games this year where he was outstanding. So, no, I'm not moving away from Marvin Harrison Jr. By any stretch. I think they have their guy. They have a guy that's going to be elite, just like his dad was. He will be the same type of player, and certainly he's already shown in a number of games this year what type of player he can become.
So, Field, I'm going to go with Mel on this one, but I'm going to give you my reasoning. because if you're going to I'm going to use like NFL replay rules.
I know where you're going.
If you're going to overturn a call, it has to be indisputable visual evidence. In this case, I'm going to say the call stands.
Okay.
Not the call is confirmed, but the call stands. It's too close for me to say I would make the switch.
I like that. Like one of those interceptions where the ball touches the ground, but you can't decide whether the ball adjusted at all. I feel you, Greeny. It's a close one, but I want a good content here. I'll sacrifice.
No, I'm not telling you you're wrong.
Yeah,
I'm telling you may be right.
Yeah,
but to me,
I got to give you credit, Greeny. That on a scale of 1 to 10 on comments and takes and the way to break this all down, that's a 10 because I didn't even think about that. I didn't. When I was doing this, I didn't think about kind of if it's a push, you just let it stand.
Tie goes to the runner. There you
don't
go.
change it. So Greeny,
that's
the call
on the field.
That's why
the call on the field was Marvin Harrison, right? That's the call that was made on the field. If we're going to overturn it, we have to see indisputable visual evidence. To be, for the record, that isn't our standard here. We're making up our standard. It can be whatever we want it to be, but that was if I were making that decision, that's
I won't argue with you on that one, though, Greeny.
Okay. So now let's move forward a little bit here, and we can move at a little quicker pace through some of these because we're not making a lot of changes. There's no obvious reason, I would assume, why anyone would disagree or change what the Chargers did, taking Joe Alt at number 5. I will go so far as to say, Field, if I were to bet on any team like a stock, like where are they going? To me, the Chargers are going straight up. They have an elite coach. He talks about his offensive linemen like they are weapons, which is what they are in his offense. That feels like a pick made in heaven.
No two ways about it. Joe Alt, as clean as a whistle last year coming out of Notre Dame. The guy just screamed he was going to be an early first round pick. And I know this, this is old news because it's not like they just decided to do this yesterday. But do not overlook this fact, Greeny. This is a lifelong tight end and left tackle who they say, you're going to play right tackle. And go for it, right? Like, just no problem. Like, you're going to be the new right tackle for the Los Angeles Chargers, protecting Justin Herbert, the $55 million per year quarterback. He has not been. Flawless is too strong of a characterization for anybody, but the guy looks like a natural-born right tackle.
And let me just say this, guys, and this kind of ties into our quarterback discussion. Justin Herbert's energy and passion for football is at an all-time high now.
It's so great, right?
You see it. You see him just loving the game. And I think he had said back when he was at Oregon, I love being in the classroom. That's when I'm the happiest. I think he loves being on the football field as much now. Yeah, he's happy. So I think what Jim Harbaugh has brought to Justin Herbert is love for the game, passion for the game, energy, enthusiasm. You see him out there, just hit the body language of Justin Herbert right now is something we see because of one Jim Harbaugh.
For sure. And I can just very briefly as an aside say, I now have the great experience of working every Sunday with Alex Smith on Sunday NFL Countdown. And Alex had exactly that experience with Jim, and he raves about him to this day. Alex basically had his love for football beaten out of him in his first few years in the NFL. Those are my words, not his.
Yeah.
But I'm comfortable saying that the game was just beating him down, and Jim Harbaugh resurrected not just his career and led him to having what he wound up having, which was a really good NFL career, but I think absolutely rekindled his love for the game. And not that Justin Herbert was in the exact same situation, but I see what you're seeing. Okay, let's move forward as we were redrafting. So at number 6, the Giants took Malik Nabers. Here's the question. And
this is a good one.
Mel, you're still on the board here. I mean, Malik Nabers is still on the board for you. They could still take him, but having seen what we've seen now, Mel, would you consider taking a quarterback here if you're the Giants? Would you take Bo Nix? It's so hard to say J.J. McCarthy because he got knocked out for the year. Where did you go with the Giants?
Yeah, that's the hard part. I tried to tie this into what the organization was thinking then. I didn't want to go too crazy because they wanted Drake Maye. They didn't want J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix. They could have done that, and they didn't. So I didn't want to go. And Bo has shown very well. And we're going to get to Bo. But I think when you look at Michael Penix Jr., obviously like Patrick Mahomes being redshirted because they already have their quarterback. It's kind of similar with Alex Smith when you had Patrick Mahomes, and now you have Kirk Cousins and you have Michael Penix Jr. But to the point about this pick, I don't think you can go away. I think the Field has to now because he has Malik Nabers already taken. But the fact that Malik, and I said this, Daniel Jones was the quarterback. That allowed you, and Drake Maye was gone. That allowed you to get Malik Nabers. Now you have a receiver who, if he can just eliminate the cost, and he has had, when you talk about Marvin Harrison and Malik Nabers has had 2 drops. We always talk about quarterbacks. That play cost them the game. That one play. The drop against Washington right before the 2-minute warning cost the Giants that game. The drop against Dallas when Daniel Jones put it right on the money, couldn't have handed it to him. And he got hurt on that same play. Didn't catch the ball. Key play of the Dallas game. There's 2 football, one of which they would have probably won was the Washington game. Dallas, we'll see. Bottom line is he has had a couple of critical drops. And you think about now they're going to have a changeover quarterback moving forward. We'll see after the bye. Drew Lock, what happens there. Malik Nabers, I think Giant fans, whenever they get their quarterback, if it's Shedeur Sanders, whoever it may be, having a Malik Nabers is going to benefit that offense and benefit that quarterback. So I don't think you can do anything here if, because I didn't change the Harrison pick. Field, you did. So what are you doing here? Now you got a guy. You had a little question mark, obviously, about Marvin. Do you go with the quarterback here?
Greeny, you know this because you work with him on set a couple days a week. Our guy Damian Woody has this big exasperate that'll drop there when you ask him a tough question. I've been doing my best Big Woody impersonation right now because I thought long and hard about this one. I'm sticking with a wide receiver. It's Marvin Harrison in this case because Malik Nabers has already been taken. But knowing what I know right now about the 2025 draft class, and the Giants don't have a choice. They have to take a quarterback or they are spending big money on a quarterback this offseason. At this point, I believe there is one who is potentially worth a lot of money. But even that comes with some serious peril, that being Sam Darnold, who, by the way, may want zero part of going back to New York, having already played for the Jets. This class, this upcoming class just is such a wild card class. I just don't know that I can sit here right now and bang my proverbial gavel and say Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, top 5 or 8 pick or whatever pick the Giants end up having. So I thought long and hard about a quarterback, but I ended up with Marvin Harrison Jr., and I felt like for me, it was kind of a sign of respect for the prospect that I did think Marv was last year.
All right. So J.C. Latham, the Alabama tackle, went 7 to Tennessee. And both of you kept that in place. Both of you said that was the right pick to make. And then it gets interesting. The 8th pick was the one that set the 2024 NFL draft on its ear, as the Falcons, having just signed Kirk Cousins to a huge free agent contract, chose Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback from Washington, and everybody was stunned. We have a little shakeup in our own redraft here. And Mel, I must admit, having known you now for 28 years, I'm stunned by what you did. Tell Field what you decided to do at number 8.
I'm making a trade. Hey, I'm making a trade. There is a trade. A trade has been made. Las Vegas are moving up 13 to 8 and take Michael Penix Jr. You say, well, hey, Atlanta took them. They're going to do that. Atlanta is going to get a couple high picks. When Bills move up from 12 to 7 to get Josh Allen, it costs them 2 second-round picks. So think about that. So 2 early picks added on to the flip for the Raiders and Atlanta in this trade. So Atlanta gets some picks. They move down from 8 to 13. I'll give you what they do. At 13, Atlanta Falcons take Jared Verse, pass rusher, defensive and outside linebacker, coming off the edge, doing a great job with the LA Rams opposite Byron Young. They get the pass rusher they need in Jared Verse. They have Kirk Cousins, and now they get a couple extra picks. They could have added to their equation in terms of helping some units that needed to be assisted in terms of personnel. But the Raiders go from 13 to 8 and get Michael Penix Jr. Now they wouldn't be in a position now to worry about quarterback and who they're going to get, where they're going to be picking. They're going to have to move up. Is it Shedeur Sanders? They would have already had Michael Penix Jr. in an AFC loaded with great quarterbacks in a division with Mahomes and Herbert and now Bo Nix. I mean, you got to get one. The Raiders would have had that guy had they been aggressive and gone up from 13 to 8 and gotten Michael Penix Jr.
Typical Kiper stunt. Look at this. He won't even allow trades in his mock drafts, and now he's doing trades and redrafts. For Greeny, you're already the ref earlier on when you wouldn't overturn the play based off of video review. I need you to throw some sort of penalty on Kiper here right now. We said I didn't
understand there were rules, Field. You didn't give me any rules last week.
There are rules. Look at this. I mean,
you didn't
making a trade.
Greeny, you can settle this. Was there any rules given to this redraft?
There were no rules, but that's what I meant when I set it up by saying I'm stunned by this, because I remember for how many years You steadfastly refuse to allow trades in your mock drafts.
Yeah, because it distorts a trade will distort a mock draft. It distorts the whole mock draft because we don't know if that trade's happening. We know how this played out. We know how this played out. Right. The redraft, we know how it played out last year. I'm saying if you could if you're the Raiders, you're aggressively going up because now we have to think like we do now. Now you know what happened, right? You know, we're at 13. One of those quarterbacks are falling in our lap. We got to aggressively move up and get one because they're going to be that feeding frenzy for quarterbacks was there and it happened. And they didn't get the quarterback at 13, right? They got a heck of a player in Brock Bowers, but now they don't have a quarterback. What's that going to do? Now you're picking right now. What are you picking right now if the draft were held today? You'd be picking 5th in the draft, probably moving up from there. So now maybe it's Shedeur Sanders, but try got to go up and get him. Cam Ward, maybe you have to go up and get him. We'll see. Okay. But you have the ability in this redraft, I think, because there was no rules, to say, what would you do now? And Atlanta would be happy because they're getting a couple extra picks and they're getting Jared Verse, who's looked really good for the LA Rams so far.
No, you're wrong. Because Atlanta's not getting Jared Verse at 13. They're getting him at 8. Because they should have just done this in the first place, taking Latu or Dallas Turner or Jared Verse at pick number 8 overall. That's what they should have done.
Well, why would you turn down my trade when you're getting extra picks and you're still getting Verse at 13? He went beyond that.
Trades and redraft. That's why, because we don't do trades and redrafts. There are rules. There are regulations.
They should have told me that last week, Field.
I was trying to tell you that, but you were too busy telling me about generational talent.
Hey, Greeny already said there were no rules, so you didn't try hard. You didn't try at all. Greeny said there were no rules.
Hey,
as the judge here, I'm going to accept it, but I'm going to give the jury very strict instructions over how they should weigh some of the evidence, which parts of it are and are not admissible. So we'll do that. Let me ask one question that jumped into my head here. As you guys were talking, Field, I'll give it to you because if you had thought of this, you probably would have done it too. Why wouldn't you get Jared Verse and get more things if you're Atlanta? And the Raiders clearly needed a quarterback. In the universe that we have just created, and I guess this was the situation then too, Penix was available, McCarthy was available, Nix was available, and to me, Nix looks terrific. Now, I can't make up my own mind how much of that is just Sean Payton, but we are redrafting here, Field. Yeah. Which of those 3 guys, if you're taking a quarterback, do you take?
Is this for if I am still Atlanta and I am sitting there taking the heir apparent to Kirk Cousins? Is that correct? Okay. Or is that general? The rules are getting really fuzzy here now.
Yeah.
I will stand with J.J. McCarthy. That was my 4th ranked quarterback coming out of the draft last year. Now, J.J. gets a bit of a benefit here in this regard. He and Michael Penix Jr. We haven't seen anything from them to dissuade us from how we felt about them coming into the NFL, right? We were talking about how with Caleb, it's not just what we've seen from Jayden, it's some of what we haven't seen from Caleb, right? So I would stick with J.J. McCarthy there, who I think still has a chance to be a very, very high-level quarterback in the NFL. He was player 18 on my big board when we got to the concluding days before the NFL draft last year. But if I'm the Falcons, I'm not doing this again. I'm taking Jared Verse, which you should have done in the first place, because Michael Penix still might not play for another year and a half from right now. And what was the one thing we kept saying the Falcons need? Just draft a pass rusher, right? You need a pass rusher. You need a pass rusher badly. How about 9 sacks in 10 games for the Falcons? That's not bad. That is like potentially historically bad for the Atlanta Falcons. It was so obvious what they needed now, and there were great rushers. And if you were concerned, one of like the small demerits for Jared Verse was he was an older player. He had played 5 full college seasons, including 1 at the University of Albany. They took Michael Penix Jr., who had played 6, so they weren't that concerned about the age. I would have taken Jared Verse, made it easy. He's got 4.5 sacks. Looks terrific for the Rams right now.
Let me just say this, Greeny and Field. I was just thinking about the Raiders and the late, great Al Davis. One of the best football minds in the history of the National Football League was Al Davis, right? Yeah, everybody makes mistakes in the first round. Everybody does that, no matter who you are when you're there forever. Al Davis did a remarkable job. He was a brilliant football man, right? Yeah. Wish he was still here, evaluating everything and doing his job. Left-handed quarterbacks, the snake, Kenny Stabler. I thought about the Raiders with the snake. Even David Humm. Remember David Humm out in the Brown, another left-handed quarterback. So I thought about a guy can sling it all over the field and will take that shot. I just thought about the Raiders and the late, great Al Davis when I made Michael Penix Jr. that pick. It worked out. He was the 8th pick for the Raiders. Why not? the left-handed quarterback. They're pretty good with the snake. Kenny Stabler, but phenomenal. Great guy, great quarterback. So if you can get another Kenny Stabler, but a guy that has power the ball all over the field like Michael Penix Jr. can, why not? I thought he would look pretty good in a Raider uniform.
Let's get in one more here. The number one commie fan, which I'm assuming means Commanders.
We hope.
I don't know. I don't know that for certain. But tweeted in the question, did the Bears make a critical mistake by taking Odunze instead of Olu Fashanu at number 9? And Field, I know that you would have gone a different direction, but it isn't Fashanu.
It is not. And by the way, Fashanu has been fine. He hasn't played that much. He's played out of position at guard for the Jets mostly this year. We'll see whether Tyron Smith is available this weekend for the Jets. He's been banged up. I will go with Talaiasi Fuaga, who went 14th overall. The New Orleans Saints has basically been a day one starter for New Orleans, and there's some high-level stuff on film from that guy. He was a guy who was rated right around player 13 or 14 for me, about 2 spots lower than Olu Fashanu coming out of the draft. So I have no major issue if you wanted to go Fashanu instead, but what we have seen with the Bears is that protection has been a much greater issue than pass catchers so far. So to build off of the theme that we discussed earlier, I'm going offensive line. I'm giving them Talaiasi Fuaga.
Yeah, I'm sticking with Rome Odunze, Greeny. I mean, I'm not getting off Rome. He had the drop right in his hand, drop against New England. Nothing went right against New England last week. He had 3 catches for 23 yards. The previous game against Arizona, 5 catches for 104 yards. The other games where he was solid. Rome Odunze is a really good football player. Caleb's going to need him. You need the targets. The offensive line, they obviously have to build up, but I'm going to stick with that pick and Rome Odunze.
And then very quickly, I want 2 more things before we wrap for the day. Mel, at number 10, you made another flip. You went Bo Nix.
Flip-flop and Kiper. Flip-flop and Kiper.
Well, in this case, at least you didn't make a trade. But in this one, I am fascinated because to me, the biggest question I have in reverse, in retrospect about this draft, or at least one of the biggest, is how much is Bo Nix a product of being the perfect fit for what Sean Payton does? Mel, when you redid it, have the Vikings taking Bo Nix at 10.
Yes, obviously taking the quarterback. I think you just said it, Green. Sean Payton. I had said last year when I did the mock 4.0, I had him going to Denver because of the Drew Brees comp. And the other thing I hate is comps, but I did it here. So you can always veer off the road a little bit, right? You can always go off the schedule a little bit. I went against my hating of comps and gave a comp. Drew Brees. I thought Sean Payton would see a little bit of that in Bo Nix. Maybe he did. Okay. And I gave all the reasons why, which I'm not going to bore you with today. There's a ton of reasons why Bo Nix was a comp to Drew Brees. But I think when you talk about the quarterback, Kevin O'Connell, everybody said, what made Sam Darnold in Minnesota? What allowed him to have success? Now he throws some interceptions. He's maybe turning it over, but what allowed him to have a really good year so far with Minnesota? Kevin O'Connell, right? Who was with who? McVay, and was the former quarterback. Actually, was in the same draft as Joe Flacco and Matt Ryan, if you can believe it. Okay. So when you think about where we are with Minnesota, it's Kevin O'Connell, made Sam Darnold. You draft Bo Nix. Bo Nix has already shown very well in Denver. Now that has to do with Sean Payton and that infrastructure and that system and everything that Drew Brees had in New Orleans with Sean Payton. So I'm going to go Bo Nix here. JJ McCarthy, I said going into the draft, he was kind of a wild card. I hadn't seen that performance where he carried the team, but he didn't have to. And then he got hurt. So JJ, let's hope he's the guy. Let's hope he's the guy for Minnesota. But if you're redrafting it today, who has shown really well for a team in Denver that needs that? Because they're in that same division that we talked about, the Raiders situation, needing that quarterback in the same conference. Now they have Bo. Hey, you almost should have beaten Kansas City, giving them their first loss since Christmas Day last year. Bo, nothing. He doesn't flinch. He's 24. He's experienced. He went through all that adversity at Auburn and had to deal with all that criticism. Went out to Oregon and had 2 great years. Love this kid. He's quality through and through. He's high character. He's a tremendous young man, and he's got that football team. And if he's not as good as Drew Brees or right there where Drew Brees was throughout his career, I would be surprised because Sean Payton's going to be right there with him every step of the way.
I wouldn't be surprised. Man, Drew Brees is awesome. Drew Brees is like one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time. Got crazy pills in this show today. I'm sticking with JJ McCarthy. And I said it earlier, maybe he's getting the benefit of not having seen him play yet. Minnesota, though, I do believe would be tethered to a quarterback one way or the other. And we were talking about how Sean Payton has helped sort of rise Bo Nix up. We're seeing the same thing in Minnesota, just with the veteran quarterback, Sam Darnold, who has come back down to earth of late, and as of this conversation, leads the NFL in turnovers. So I'm not naive to the fact that it hasn't been as red hot of late as it was to begin the season. But I think that JJ McCarthy would get a similar bump from Kevin O'Connell, who I'm not here to re-rank or redraft every offensive coordinator in the NFL right now. But as far as head coaches / offensive overseers, you'd be hard pressed to find too many that I respect more than Kevin O'Connell, what he does for an offense, and what I believe he will do for JJ McCarthy's career.
You just stole he just stole one of my catchphrases, Greeny.
Which is?
Frank Caliendo would tell you that's a penalty flag with young Field.
Owen. What a crazy
He said hard pressed. I'm the only person who can say hard pressed. Okay, you can never.
I'm hard pressed to believe
never say that again. I won't ever say generational. You got to let me at least have hard pressed.
Virtual handshake right now. I just shook your hand virtually. Right. Deal.
And let me end it with this. And I don't want it because we're long already. But I just a 1 minute thing. Rajveer Garcha, the Garch, tweeted us a question: would we see more defensive players drafted early, as there were none selected until number 15? We already mentioned Jared Verse, who's obviously been terrific. Yep. To me, I think Quinyon Mitchell
Thank you, Greeny. Yep.
might be like as valuable. I know he doesn't play quarterback, so people don't talk about him. I'm not sure he isn't as valuable as any rookie in the entire NFL this year. Mel, if they were redoing this draft, would his name have gotten called a lot earlier?
Yes, Quinyon Mitchell, who Nick Saban tried to get to Alabama, and he said, I'm staying at Toledo. I mentioned my Toledo Rockets a couple weeks ago. I got Max and Hook,
weekly mention.
Lyman, got Newton, got everybody going from Toledo. They're just staying there. They're not leaving to go to Alabama or anybody in the SEC or Big Ten. I will say this, Cooper DeJean, who should have been a top 15, top 20 pick coming out of Iowa. Punt return, had a key punt return last week as well. Quality young man, versatile. Fangio loves him. He said if you make a mistake, he ain't making it twice.
Yep.
Super smart. This kid and all those young players, Jalen Carter, great job. He was the number one player in that draft a few years ago. Didn't go number one. Really is playing like the number one pick in a draft. All those other guys, Smith, Dean, everybody. But Cooper DeJean is a heck of a football player. And he's done a really good job as a rookie after he came back from that injury through camp, had to work his way back to 100%. Should have been a first-round pick, and they got him in round 2.
Yep.
I would be hard-pressed to disagree with that. All right, and so that is it for this was a
good
lot
episode.
of fun.
This was good. This was good.
Very good. Field, you get the credit for this one. This was an excellent idea. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Again, we are First Draft. We would invite you to like and subscribe to the podcast, and then tune in every Thursday during the season for full NFL draft analysis. And keep those questions coming. As you saw, we had great ones this week. Use the hashtag First Draft, or just reply when Field and or I post them early in the week with your questions, and you'll get them answered here. This was a great week, everybody. Enjoy the games this weekend. For Field and Mel, I am Greeny. We'll see you next week.